I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, we have Alicia Preston. She is the founder of Mindful Roots. While Alicia has a background in education and behavioral sciences, it was her own mental health challenges and the realization that close friends, students, and family members were sharing similar experiences that led her to fully discover mindfulness and yoga. These events led her on an inward journey of self-healing. She found breath work, meditation, mantras, and with this, greater purpose and intention. Mindful teachings inspired her to launch her work as a mindfulness and yoga teacher. Alicia is grateful to work with children, teens, educators, and all humans to help them embrace joy and build resilience through mindfulness. She is on a mission to bring yoga and mindfulness programming into schools and youth groups through physical literacy and mindful self-regulation practices, also bringing those into the workplace. She loves this work because she knows the significant impact that mindfulness practice can have on mental health, confidence, emotional and social intelligence, and self-love. Alicia is also a mom, so she explores this work in her heart, in her life, in her home, and with the world. Alicia, I welcome you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. My heart is so warm right now.
Well, I have been personally very impacted by your mindfulness work, your self-regulation practices, and also the beautiful malas that you create. We've collaborated in many incredible ways and had great conversations. And I just thought it's your work is always important, but I really wanted people to hear from you right now. So we've been in this pandemic for several months. People are going to be listening in August and in the fall, and wherever people are, everybody's kind of heading back to school, and I think even people without kids kind of have this back to school feeling. So I just wanted to, talk to you about, kids and parents and educators, and without overwhelming them further, just really giving some practical tools and discussion around how mindfulness can play a role. So I know that's a big mouthful, but why don't we start with mindfulness? Like, we hear this term all the time, but what, in your words, does it really, really mean?
To me, mindfulness just means paying attention and being present in the moment. It means having self-kindness, and it also means having kindness for common humanity. I think the biggest piece of mindfulness is being non-judgmental. That's just being soft on ourselves and others. And even recently, it also means uncovering our unconscious bias that all of us seem to have, that we were raised with, and just taking a moment to practice that non-judgment and opening up our exteroception, I guess, of what others truly are feeling and going through. And when I say non-judgment to me is where I actually tie in Stuart Shanker's self-reg framework. to me, learning that self-regulation framework theory was really an aha moment in the non-judgment piece of mindfulness.
Amazing. So do you want to tell us, again, self-reg is, well, a term actually that I just heard in the last several months. So for somebody who maybe is like me, like relatively new to it or hasn't heard it before, what is the basic premise of that?
It's basically understanding the stressors in our lives and learning how to manage our own energy and tension levels. And what the Schenker method does is it provides a 5-step framework. And so for me, this is a huge part of my mindfulness practice, because when I think of mindfulness, I think that we can sit in a guided formal practice. I think those formal practices are so important for us. But I'll be honest, I kind of find it boring to sit for 20 to 30 minutes in deep meditation. It's really hard for me. I'm more of an active mindfulness meditation person. So for me, it's just like in yoga. It's like what we do on the mat is the first step in what we do in our entire lives. And just being mindful 24/7 through our lives is liberating. And through mindful self-regulation, we can really begin to understand behaviors and see behaviors differently. And it starts with ourselves. We can't teach and expect others to be mindful and calm if we're not doing the inner work ourselves. And I feel like that's how my work has shifted from working with children over the past few years to taking a step back and working more with adults and parents.
Amazing. And so could you give us a real world example of, because I've seen you mention sometime how you're using this, with yourself and with your kids. Could you give us a real world example so people can really understand, how this could apply to a very simple everyday stressor?
For sure. So, okay, there's 5 steps in self-regulation. And I just want to stress that they are not linear. You don't have to follow them in suit. So the first step is reframing behavior. All right. And 99% of the time, the behavior we're seeing within ourselves and others is actually stress behavior. And when I was teaching mindful tools to kids, before I did this training, they were coming and they had anxiety and separation anxiety and these big emotions. And I always have taught that there's no such thing as bad emotions. There's just big emotions and feelings. And we just need to learn to be in tune with that and ultimately practice self-reg. So step 1 is reframing behavior. And so with that, we learn to distinguish stress behavior as instead of misbehavior. So whenever we see a behavior, we have to really be asking, okay, why is this happening now? And why? Why is this happening? Why this behavior and why now? So for an example for this behavior, I have a really hard time with clutter in my space, in my home. And if I have deadlines and pressures in work or home life, and I go downstairs and my kitchen is a mess, I can begin to notice myself become a little bit more frustrated and agitated. And if you could see my mind jar that I like to use as a tool, is there's glitter everywhere and I can't see clearly through that jar. It's like a big storm on the ocean.
Just to interject, the jar is like a mason jar full of water with glitter in it. And we shake it up and we can see how busy our mind is, or it could be settled. I just loved that metaphor and visual example when I saw it from you. So yes, And I very much identify, like I'm laughing when you're like, oh, I get a little bit frustrated. I was like, I get a lot frustrated.
Yeah, it's when that mind jar is full and cluttered, it's really hard for us to respond. And that's basically what mindfulness is taking a moment, taking a breath, letting that glitter settle and responding rather than reacting. And through self-reg and mindfulness, we can create that space to respond rather than react. So for me, I may get short with the kids or my husband. And I notice that in my tone of voice and my body language and even my eye gaze. So that could be an example of a behavior where I could be like, okay, why am I acting like this right now? It's because when you go to step 2, there's all kinds of different stressors across domains. And so for me, visual clutter is a huge cognitive stress for me. Another example of reframing behavior is maybe during the end of the day, we're starting to feel a little run down. If you think of your energy and tension levels as a huge glass of water, you've kind of poured that water out during the day from different events, or just if you have children, you're always lending water to everyone. You're always lending your calm to everyone. And if we're not practicing restorative activities to reduce our own stress, like meditation, walking, journaling, etc., then we can feel empty. So I know for me at the end of the day, when I'm reaching in the pantry for another handful of chocolate chunks, I need to really slow down and ask, why am I reaching for the chocolate chunks? And it's mostly because, I'm tired, I'm feeling run down, I have the bedtime routine ahead of me, which takes a lot of my energy and tension. So for me, reframing means being soft on ourselves and soft on our others. And when we do that, when we're coming into a situation that has a lot of high energy and tension, that's our first step. Reframe, stay soft, ensuring our voice is calm, our eye gaze is soft, and then being non-judgmental, because this is when we ask why. There's always different stressors happening underneath behavior. And what I love about this is it allows us to be more mindful of the behaviors we're seeing and really dig deep and figure out, why are they happening? And when we can do this and reframe and recognize that the behaviors I'm seeing in others and myself are a stress behavior, there's just waves of tension eased from our own shoulders. So that's step 1.
I feel like you're describing my life, especially the grabbing for the chocolate chunks. I was like, okay, I've got some work to do.
Yeah.
And a few things. I just want to emphasize here too, and you can tell me if you disagree or agree, but, with this term non-judgment, it sounds maybe simple, non-judgment, okay, but it's very hard, there are judgments that come up when we don't even know, when our mind is so trained. So what tools can we use to, when you walk down when you're stressed and you want those chocolate chunks and you walk down into that kitchen and it's messy and you have a deadline and you're going through this practice of reframing and understanding the why, how do you move through this?
I first I reframe and, be mindful and soft. And then through the past year, through this self-reg journey, I've really learned tools. Before, I had all kinds of great mindful meditation tools, and I still use those in the moment about just getting grounded and centered. But I've started to come up with a list of ways that I can reduce my stress in the moment. So for me, lately, I'll put a podcast in and put my phone in, and I'll set a timer for 10 minutes and I'll do a quick tidy and I'll take note of how I was feeling before that 10 minutes. and how I feel after. And that's what mindfulness gives us, is these great interoception skills of body and mind awareness. So just by taking moments to reduce my stress in that moment is huge. One of my favorite new breaths I do is the Bumble Bee Breath, which just calms our vagus nerve and our parasympathetic nervous system instantly. So it's just breathing in, and when I exhale, buzzing like a bumblebee. And
I love it.
that has probably been one of the biggest tools for me. Another one is my Malaby jewelry. And also going back to your cards, like looking at whatever cards I pull in the morning to set my intention for the day, I can also reflect back on that. Like, okay, what do I need to bring right now? It's not eating a bag of chocolate chips. Perhaps it's fascination. That's the card I pulled today.
I love that card.
But for me, you can turn, like doing a simple chocolate meditation. Instead of grabbing a handful of chocolate chunks, I grab one, and I can go outside and just let that chocolate chunk melt in my mouth and listen to the birds. So for me, that's huge. And it also goes back to recognizing what is causing me stress in that moment. And when we look at recognizing stress in the moment, we scan across 5 different domains.
What I love about what you're saying also, and I've recognized this very much in myself, well, every day I notice it, but over the past several years, is when you're describing, I often also time chunk things. Like, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes, or I'm just going to do this for 10 minutes, and it's 10 minutes. I could have just spent stressing about it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe sitting at my desk, staring at my computer, or just, being overwhelmed. And instead I'm like, to your point, like, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes and like organize something or clean something or just do it. And it's productive. So it's really also practicing and being, instead of just being in our heads.
Yeah. When we are in our heads, we tend to get carried away. And that's where our thoughts turn to fears and just get overwhelmed. Yeah.
And so let's shift the conversation a little bit, because we do want to talk about this back to school period. And I know that your work has shifted more towards educators, but I do want to ask you to sort of provide some tips, for the kids and the parents as September approaches. So where do you think it's the best place to start? Should we start with the kids or the teachers?
I think it's important to start with adults, with the teachers, with the parents.
Okay, let's start there.
I worked in the school system for 13 years. And in kindergarten, I had children coming to me with stomach aches and headaches. And these are all forms of anxiety, like the physical ailments that come from anxieties. And I think it's important to know that when kids are behaving in a way, perhaps they're having a temper tantrum or something, we have to remember that they may be acting from their limbic brain. So I just want to touch on the triune brain quickly, which is basically a metaphor. So if you make a little fist with your hand and your thumb is inside of your fingers, we can think of that as our brain, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Our wrist is the lizard brain. So that's our brain stem. And this is like a metaphor for survival, basically. So that brain stem, the lizard brain, detects fight or flight. And when we go into that mode, we're on autopilot. And that's why it's important for us to reframe behavior and stay soft. Because when a child is in autopilot and they've gone limbic, they don't understand the words we're saying. All they're looking at is our energy, our tone, our eyes. They're responding from our energy, our limbic response. So that's why self-reg and mindfulness is so important for educators, and to practice it ourselves so we can fill our energy tank. So when someone in our life, a child, a student, has gone limbic, we can co-regulate instead of escalate the situation. So ultimately, it starts with us. So going back to that little brain, in the middle, our thumb, we have our limbic system. This is our mammal brain. And this is where we process our emotions, our memories, our habits, and make decisions. So if a child is under so much stress in their lives and something happens at school and they go limbic, I feel like we need to be trained in self-reg and mindfulness to not discipline that behavior. And I feel that's what's happening is, for instance, my son had a situation at school this year and it kept happening with the same child, and he was getting hurt. And a week before March break and everything, we went into pandemic mode. I got a phone call from the school that my son was pushed by the same student. And this child is on maybe his third suspension of the year. So I go into the school and I instead ask the principal, what are we doing to be proactive to help this other student? Because obviously this child went into red brain. What they call, Stephen Porges calls flipping your lid. And when we flip our lid, if you have that fist and our fingers go up, we've gone limbic. We are under so much stress that we're not processing, and we've gone into fight, flight, or fright response. And so really we need to work as educators to give children the space and help teach them what causes them stress and ways to reduce the stress in the moment. It's about being body aware of everything. And I worry because we don't have the space, we don't have the support system in our schools to teach this.
That was my question. So this isn't something that is currently widely taught to teachers. So for someone who is listening, who is interested and, just really sees the value of this, and I can just only imagine that it could feel like a very steep mountain to climb because, there's so many children in the classroom coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, stressful situations. Where can someone start? Where is a great place for them? I guess it's starting with themselves, but what advice would you have for teachers?
There's a lot of educators I'm working with through the cohort of the Mary Center via self-reg. I also do workshops, and I haven't really incorporated the self-reg work into it. I'm halfway through my facilitator's course. But I also do lead teachers through workshops of yoga and mindfulness and incorporating physical literacy through storytelling. So basically, the kids are practicing mindfulness and yoga without really knowing it. So we can turn any storybook into physical literacy. So I do a lot of workshops surrounding that. That will look different this year, obviously, but it does start with ourselves. And it's just mind-blowing the way self-reg has changed my life, because it changes my lens and my perception. I see everything now from a self-reg perspective. It's important for teachers to become aware of the stressors that are affecting them. So can I touch on those stressors quickly? Because I think they're really important.
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
So for example, we have, they state 5 domains. The biological domain. So these stressors affect basically our physiological system. And you think of your body as a thermostat, right? And we look at a thermos and it's constantly, or a furnace, sorry, it needs to maintain that homeostasis balance. So when there's too much noise, or there's crowds, or too much visual stimulation, or perhaps a child is hungry, or they've had too much sugar, or they haven't slept a lot, or the scent is bothering them. For me, a huge biological stress is too much noise. When there are multiple people talking to me, my mind, my body, like I flip my lid very, very quickly there. It's really hard for me. So that's one of the ways that we need to pay attention. And again, it starts with ourselves as an educator, as a parent. If we have too much noise and we see our glitter jar in our body is starting to get fogged up, what are some ways that we reduce stress in the moment? And then what are some ways that we can help children become more aware of, oh, that's a stressor for me. I need to calm down a little. So, and everyone's different. We all react to stress differently. I was in the pharmacy last week, and there was country music playing over the system, and I just about lost it because country music apparently is a hidden stressor for me. I didn't really understand that till that moment, and I had to get out of that store very, very fast. We also look at the cognitive domain, and we know that math is one of the number one stressors for children. For myself, too many to-do tasks can be a cognitive stressor for me. Making decisions is hard. Remembering information can be really difficult. Being put on the spot, having too many interruptions are all examples of stressors in the cognitive domain. And again, you can refer back to the Mary Center. I can give you that link.
That'd be great.
They have so many free resources. And then we look at the emotional domain. So perhaps the child or the teacher is experiencing grief or loss. Perhaps they're embarrassed about something. They're depressed. There's comparison to self and others, and change of routines. Like our kids going back to school have had a huge change of routine, and we have to be soft with that and remember that. And then we also look at the social domain. So I think together around the world, we're all experiencing some similarities in the social and pro-social domains. So for the social domains, it could be a new classroom. It could be public speaking for an adult. It could be bullying. It could be crowded classrooms, not having enough friends or feeling left out. And then finally, the pro-social domain. And these can be stressors from world events, watching too much news, just being really empathetic and sympathetic towards others, feeling guilty. And the biggest one is the limbic reactions of others. So it's really important for us to practice mindfulness and self-care so we can self-regulate to lend others our calm in times when they may be in a limbic state. So those are the 5 domains. And that's step 2 of self-reg, is recognizing those stressors and why we're seeing the behavior we are. And when we look at those domains, we kind of have this aha moment and think, oh yeah, that affects me. That's also affecting the child. And for me, like, that's the non-judgment piece of mindfulness, and that also the unconscious bias piece as well, because it's us taking a moment to breathe, to not react, to respond and really scan and be like, why and why now is this happening? And it's difficult. It takes a lot of practice to get to that space. It's a lifelong journey. And that's what I feel as educators, especially, they may have to teach a new curriculum now. They may feel like self-reg is just one more thing, one more program. It's not a program, because the end of programs, we expect direct results. And this is a lifelong practice. But the beautiful thing is there's science backing it up. And it will uncover a lot of feelings and emotions for us. And it will also provide beautiful healing. And I think that's what our education system needs right now, is just that softness with an emphasis on mental health and well-being. And I truly believe it does start with self-regulation and mindfulness, because when we can understand what others are going through, we can offer more compassion and empathy towards them.
I love it. Well, and those stressors to me are so interesting because as you're describing them, I'm becoming more aware of stressors in my own life. And it is this practice of awareness, right? There are so many things going on that we just take for granted and things become normal. And I remember hearing this quote before that has always really resonated with me, is just because something is normal doesn't mean it's healthy. And so what I also hear you saying is, it's also very intentional, right? Like very much using all of your senses, all of your awareness to be aware of how you're dealing with things in a given situation with all of these stressors around you, being able to manage yourself. And then I really loved that you used the word respond, because again, I White always correct me if I'm misrepresenting something, but when we're on autopilot and not aware, we react, which is like throwing gas on the fire, whereas when we're doing this self-regulation, and even if it's like little steps at a time, it's going to add up. And I think, affect a teacher's morning routine, how they interact with the people in their lives, how they interact with the students, fellow teachers, the principals, the parents. It just has such far-reaching impact on those kids. What an incredible place for them to start, because I wish I had learned this when I was, in single-digit years.
Yeah, I wish this was when you become a parent, how you have like the baby classes and the parenting classes. Like, I wish I had this framework, and which leads us into like step 3 is reducing the stress and lightening the load. And that's, you asked me earlier,
Yes.
like, what are some ways that you can reduce the stress and lighten the load? And it's just, that's where our self-care comes in. And when I lead these workshops with educators, I always have them write down their list of things, right? And we have to be careful too, because sometimes when we look at this list, we may find maladaptive coping strategies that we'd go to. So for instance, that could be like the ice cream every single night and watching the news, which may make us feel better for a few moments, but in the long run, it's not good for our immune systems at all. So that's step 3 is lightening the load, reducing the stress. And when I'm working with educators, I'm always like, no, if you think of your students, what do you think their ways of coping with stress are? And what do you provide? Do we have the space to provide those students with ways of coping with stress? Normally, we don't provide that space. And when we're disciplining stress behavior, it's the child isn't learning anything. If anything, they're feeling more ashamed and guilty, which we don't want. So
No.
It's important for us to practice acts of self-care. And then when we look at step 4, which is enhancing stress awareness, well, that's basically being mindful. And that's where like those guided body scan meditations and yoga come into play, because we can really tune in with our brain-body connection during that time.
I'm just going to, yeah, I can't help myself but interject here.
Yeah,
It
go
just
ahead.
because I do want to punctuate this point because I hear it in a different realm, not with educators, but busy, overwhelmed people, which includes educators.
Yeah.
And, there's this idea, there's always this, but I don't have time,
Mhm.
And so for anyone interested in this topic, and listening, I always remind people of a few things. And number one is that you create your time. So we're all busy, but creating a minute, 2 minutes,
Mhm.
5 minutes, especially in the morning to set the course of your day. But also that these practices, while they might feel new and awkward at first, like they can be layered into everything we do, so always creating opportunities to self regulate, relax ourselves, enjoy ourselves, approach the world from a peaceful place. Like there are lots of tools that we can just incorporate, and then it just changes the whole situation.
It really does. That's the best way to is incorporating these tools into our natural routine. It doesn't mean sitting in practice for 15 to 20 minutes. Perhaps you take a minute and sit outside and, listening to the sounds of your environment and the world. Perhaps you take a moment to like watch a leaf blow on the tree. It's as simple as that, as regrounding and recentering and just coming back into our body again.
Exactly. We're going for a walk, hydrating, having healthy snacks, or like a screensaver that is, fills you up, or grounds you. And yeah, all of these small things layered into every day can do a lot more than a 1 week vacation every year.
Oh, for sure. For sure. You won't
Not to
need a
say we shouldn't go
vacation.
on vacation, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And
But I interrupted you, so now I will let you
oh,
continue.
no, that's okay. Um, yeah. So, like, step 4 for me, I know that yoga really helps us connect that brain body connection. And it helps us become aware of, noticing when we're starting to feel tension, perhaps in our shoulders, our belly, our neck, etc. Um, it's I feel like a lot of us can be stress blind, like you said earlier, we're just on autopilot all the time, and it's not healthy at all. But how many of us really know what it feels like to be calm and alert? What does it feel like to be relaxed? So it's important to take that time to practice through body scan meditations or active mindfulness practices like walking or cycling. Riding my bike has been when I'm feeling a little bit stressed out and tension. I just hop on my bike and I go as fast as I can. Um, and that's a way I can reduce my stress in the moment, but it also ties into step 5, which is responding and developing personal strategies for restoring your energy and reducing tension. So I know that if I don't go for my bike ride or walk in the morning, or I don't do my yoga practice, or have that time to have a coffee in silence and listen to the birds, then I'm already setting myself up for a day that could have more stress and energy and tension. So we really need to develop those personalized strategies that we know will help us self-regulate in order to co-regulate. There's another tool that I like to share, and it's called the Thayer's Energy Tension Matrix. And that is just like a quadrant, basically. So if you look at the top left quadrant, it's our high energy, low tension state. And this is where we're optimistic. We're in a flow state, basically. And as an entrepreneur and a creative, like this state has been hard for me to find over the past 6 months. And it's difficult, but it's what it is, and that's okay. I'm thankful for those snippets of weeks where I have days or hours to be in this state. And when we look at the quadrant next to it on the right hand side, that's our high energy, high tension state. Again, this can be a flow state, but oftentimes this state is sympathetic. So we may use energy producing processes, perhaps energy drinks or too much coffee, etc., to stay in this state. And we flow through these states throughout our day naturally. The bottom left-hand quadrant is our low energy, low tension state. So this is where we know our restorative practices are working. So our heart rate and our breathing are slowed. Our digestion is good. We're able to easily fall asleep at night. It's not a trouble of falling asleep. It's bringing our body into a low energy, low tension state to fall asleep. When we can be in that state, we'll naturally just fall asleep. And we need this state every single night, every single day, because it helps us feel calm and it helps with cellular repair and growth. And the final quadrant is the lower right hand, and that's what we call the low energy and high tension state. And this is a quadrant we really don't want to be in. This is where mood disorders can occur, and this is where we tend to go limbic. So if we're caught in this stress cycle, which a lot of us are, and children can be in a stress cycle as well, I love the Therametrix for a couple of reasons. Number one is it's just a little tool to check in with ourselves and feel like, okay, where am I feeling right now? Am I in a high energy, high tension state? Because I know going into this situation, if I don't take a few moments to calm down, I'm going to co-escalate the situation, and we don't need that at all. Whereas if I'm in a high energy and I'm feeling low tension, I'm able to lend my calm more. So I really like this as a tool as well for ourselves and for the kids in our lives and others in our lives. This is a tool I teach when I'm working with workplaces as well. And it's really just this aha moment of, okay, what state am I in and what activities or tools do I have to get to my optimal flow state? And that's another thing is we become.
I love it.
Yeah. There's what we call, like, have you heard of the basic rest activity cycle?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So
no,
that's just a cycle with our like natural body rhythms. And basically we go through natural cycles in our day, like we go through natural sleeping cycles at night. And I love this because it really helps us avoid burnout. So you think of it as for 90 minutes, you're in your flow state and you do your activity, you do your work, you do your writing. Well, some of us will tend to just sit at the computer for the rest of the day. And then we kind of get burnt out. And then we get into like a very low energy, high tension state, perhaps. We get stressed out. We have too much deadlines. Science tells us that if we work for 90 minutes and then take a 20-minute rest cycle, we are working with our natural like cardiac rhythms. And it's important for us just to reduce stress and repair, basically. So it's another thing I love is like work for 90 minutes, have a 20 to 30-minute break. And then you could just continue on throughout your day like that in cycles.
I love it all for several reasons, because I'm hearing you say again, like about awareness, like which I just think is foundational to everything. Like just, it sounds so simple, but actually being aware of ourselves and what's going on can just change everything. And with everything you've just said too, like I just am hearing the word balance, like, so just noticing, sometimes it sounds like we can be somewhat imbalanced and it's okay. Like we can work with an imbalance to our advantage. And other times we're imbalanced in an unhealthy way and we can counteract it with some restorative tool. And I love what you're saying about the working and the resting or playing or just going to do something different, because it's so not what we're taught, because everything feels like go hard, for as long as you can, and it's not healthy, it's not joyful, it's not sustainable. And yeah, like our bodies also are meant to feel good. They're not meant to feel chronically stressed.
For sure. And we have to, like, going back on the homeostasis thing is like, that's where I always view my life. Like, am I in balance right now? Like, what do I need to water myself and allow myself to grow? But we also have to remember that negative stress can turn into positive stress. So, like, even my journey, like the negative stress of postpartum depression and a back injury, ultimately brought a lot of light in my life. And it wasn't until I started doing those activities that restoring my energy that I was able to learn the lessons from that negative stress. For instance, I was feeling some cognitive stress leading up to this podcast interview. It's new for me, but I know in the long run, it turns into positive stress and growth. And it's important to recognize negative stress as well, and how and look at ways that we can turn that negative stress into positive stress. It's the same as exercising. We're producing stress in our body, but we know ultimately in the long run, it will become an adaptive coping mechanism for us that will lead to growth and change and just help our bodies and our immune system.
I think that's a very valuable point to make.
Yeah.
Because yes, everything involves stress, tension, and friction. And it is one of the laws of nature. Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So sometimes when you want to do something big or challenging, like there is stress and there's also growth in that, like nature endures stress all the time. So to your point, like we can't just run and avoid it. It is a valuable part of the system.
Absolutely, for sure. And I think that's perhaps where we need to see our education system go this fall, is be getting outside a little bit more. And just, we have an abundance of land in our country, and we need to just be utilizing that land, because naturally when we're outside, I feel like that's where we're in our element and we feel calm, when we are able to be one with nature. So I know that's in our own home. If we are all in a high energy or low energy, high tension state, or high energy, high tension state, and I can feel myself wanting to go limbic, and I'll refer back to the metaphor of the literature again. Like my husband and I look at each other, and I know we're both like, let's get outside. We need to get outside and walk with these kids right now. And instantly it changes everyone's mood. Or we'll go visit the horses down the road as well, which is another really great teaching tool with animals, is coming in, especially relating to the Thera matrix, is like, where am I? Where's my energy and tension right now? Because I know with my kids, if they're feeling upset or frustrated about something, if I go visit these horses down the road right now, it's not going to be a fun visit, because the horses will pick up on that energy. But normally during that 15-minute walk to the horses, we have time to practice mindfulness. And with that is just, I base it for the kids on seeing, hearing, and feeling. And so we can see in, we can hear in, and feel in, and that's that's our body awareness. But for children, I think it's easier to first go outward. So what can we see? Can we see birds? Can we see butterflies? Can we see the flower? Okay, now let's watch the flower in the wind for a moment. And then we move to hear. Like, what can you hear during this walk? And then again, then next we move to feel. And it only takes a few moments, and they don't even know they're really practicing it. I just engage them in conversation. And by the time we get to those horses, they are in a low energy and low tension state again. And I love, it's something I've learned with horses over the past year, and I'm thankful for our neighbors allowing us to visit them, is because they can pick up on our energy. Like it's just amazing.
Hmm. And I was just going to ask you in our last few minutes together about tools for kids, and maybe you've just described it. You read my mind, but just using the opportunity to really be mindful and present with our kids, especially maybe in the month leading up to school, to just really cultivate this awareness. But if you have any other practical tools that might be helpful, I'd love for you to share them.
I'm moving from mindful kids classes to more family yoga because what is important is strengthening the dyad. So the relationship between the caregiver and the child is ultimately important, which leads to strong self-reg, mindful, resilient skills. So for me, it's like touching in and playing, which as parents can be really hard for us. We have so many to dos, but for the breath part, it's like making the breath make a sound is really fun. So, like, we can be dinosaurs in the moment and, walk like a dinosaur and be really big like a dinosaur, or any animal like a lion or a bee, and basically breathing in. And on our exhale, we may roar like a dinosaur or buzz like a bumblebee. So anywhere where we can turn it into play so they don't even really know they're practicing mindfulness or self-reg is great. Another tool I love is finger mantras. And so we just take our hand and we can touch our thumb to our pointer finger. We can take a breath in and out. And then we go on our thumb to our middle finger, breathing in and out. And then our ring finger. And last, our pinky. So we can breathe that way. If I'm in the grocery store in line, I'm always practicing my finger mantras. And we can also turn that. So if we're experiencing monkey mind thoughts, perhaps our brain is thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not brave enough. We can link our finger mantras and turn them into positive affirmations and mantras. So my son, for example, his is, I am so calm. So he touches his thumb to his middle finger and he says, I. And then he touches his to his middle finger and says, am, and so on. I am so calm. So that's a really great tool that I find kids love, and they have it with them anywhere they go. Another in the moment way is just doing a quick ABC meditation. So it's ABC, or you can do the whole alphabet. So it's breathing in on A, then breathing out on B, breathing in on C, and breathing out on D. And what I love about this one is it's good for phonetic awareness as well in the early years, because you can see the kids making the letter shapes either with their finger or their nose as they're breathing. So that's also another great tool. And of course, the mind jar. I love the mind jar just for shaking it up and watching the glitter settle while you breathe. And I don't like to add any glycerin or glue to that, because ultimately we do want that glitter to settle. And so it's just a great metaphor to help us feel calm in the moment.
So I love that metaphor. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've provided. This has just it's been inspiring. It's been very informative. And I feel like, there's been a lot of information shared so people can understand the scope of it. They're also I'm always keen on like practical places where people can start, to start doing something. So if you wanted to, just leave people with some encouraging words and let them know about where they can find out about your work, go for it.
I think if there's any words I could leave the audience with is just to have hope. A child's trajectory in life is not fixed. And via mindful self-regulation, I think it just provides us with hope because it really digs down to the roots to find out what actually is causing stress in the child's life. And I'm really excited that this is starting to be a topic in communities that's coming to the forefront, as the importance of yoga, self-regulation, and mindfulness as a reducing mechanism, because not only does it reduce our own stress, but it creates the space to ultimately respond and lend others our calm. And when we're able to even practice the first step of reframing behavior and feeling calmer and soft, for me, it's taken away so much stress and guilt off my own shoulders, just because I'm seeing stress in a whole different way. So the Mary Center, Stuart Shanker's Self-Reg, has so many different courses you can do for parents, for educators, for ECEs. And for me, it's just been life-changing. And I'm really excited to be a facilitator come the fall and go from there. And my website, mindfulroots.ca, I offer family coaching sessions, private coaching sessions, which I'm working on tweaking, which will include Mala jewelry as well. So that's like a 6-week self-regulation, mindful coaching series just to help you find your calm in your life. And there's also information for corporate events as well. And I'm pretty active on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. That's me.
Amazing. We're going to have all of that on the website so people can access all of your amazing work. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Adrienne, for having me.
Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.